October 28, 2024, 1642. Adam Myers, a successful businessman and a Real Party animal, is not used to losing. In life, he has always been the one who makes the rules, not the one who follows them. One evening, in a luxury club in London, his friend and partner Thomas offered him a bet with a gambling smile that was to change everything. "Look, Adam, you always pick the most exquisite women. But what if you tried something extreme? I want to see if you have the courage to marry a woman who doesn't meet your ideals of beauty." Adam couldn't resist the challenge. His excitement pushed him onto an uncharted path. He turned to his friend and asked with a smirk, "And what will I get for my bravery?" Thomas, holding a glass of champagne, raised it and added, £1,000,000 for the winner, but you have to marry her and live together for at least 6 months. Adam quickly agreed, feeling carried away by this crazy idea. The girl Thomas had in mind was unusual. Celeste Williams had a confident look, a strong personality, and did not conform to the classical notions of beauty that Adam was used to. Her independence and ease immediately caught his attention. He had never seen anything like it in the women he had met before. Celeste must have been a challenge for him that he wanted to solve. Their first meeting took place in a trendy restaurant in the city center. Celeste was on time, and it was immediately clear that she was not one of those who were shy or lost in front of wealth. Sitting down across from Adam, she held her gaze with confidence, even a touch of disdain, which only made her more attractive in his eyes. "You must be Adam Myers," she said calmly, extending her hand with a firm shake that looked more like a business partner's gesture than the beginning of a romantic encounter. "You must be Celeste Williams," Adam replied, smiling. But the smile was more controlled than sincere, because he didn't know how to react to this unexpected openness. At some point, as they exchanged pleasantries, Celeste suddenly lowered her voice and continued, "Let's not waste time on conventions. I know about bets, terms and conditions, and rules." This confession confused Adam, but like a true gambler, he did not show his emotions. "And yet you decided to come anyway?" he asked, curious as to why such a woman would agree to this adventure. Celeste thought for a while, then, smiling slightly, answered, "I have my reasons. I'm not naive, Adam. 6 months is not a long time, but a lot can change in that time. If you think you can control me, you are mistaken." Her words sank into his soul like a hook. Adam did not expect to hear such firmness and confidence in his new, chosen one. She had no intention of succumbing to his wealth or position, and this only increased his interest in her. After their first meeting, thoughts of Celeste haunted Adam. He was used to any woman wanting his attention and wealth, but with Celeste it was different. Her indifference to his success and status was almost a mystery, and it tormented him. His interest grew into a real challenge. He not only wanted to win the bet, but also wanted to uncover her secret, to understand what was really behind her cold exterior. The next meeting took place in a small coffee shop on a quiet street, chosen by Celeste herself. This place did not fit into Adam's glamorous world, and this choice surprised him. She was sitting at one of the tables, holding a cup of hot tea, watching the passers-by with an expression of light thoughtfulness. When he walked in, she just smiled slightly, waving her hand as if he were not a rich man but an ordinary acquaintance. "I had no idea you liked places like this," Adam said, sitting down across from her. "Sometimes you have to break the mold," Celeste replied, enjoying her tea. It was as if she was talking to him directly, without the falsehood that often happened with women who tried to get his attention. October 28, 2024, 1642. The conversation quickly turned to serious topics. Celeste firmly outlined her conditions. "If we are really going to do this, I have to make something clear. I didn't come here for your money or for your status. For me, these 6 months are just time, and when it's over, I plan to leave the same way I came." Adam leaned forward a little, looking at her carefully. "But you want something from me, or you wouldn't be sitting here. What is it that you want?" "Freedom," she answered calmly, not taking her eyes off his. It's important to me that even under the terms of this contract I remain myself, and that you respect that. I won't become just another decoration in your life." Her words made him think. He used to think of people as part of a game where he was the main player. But this woman, who at first glance seemed simple, turned out to be stronger and more stubborn than he expected. She not only kept her distance, but also had her own game, in which he seemed to be the newcomer. The next few days Adam was preparing for the wedding, which was supposed to be purely formal. He didn't want any complicated ceremonies, just papers, signatures, rings, and everything to get this thing over with as soon as possible. But when the wedding day came, he felt something unusual. Celeste arrived in a modest but elegant dress, and her calm confidence was admirable. She looked unfazed, as if the event was nothing more than a mere formal act. After the ceremony, he invited her to his penthouse in central London, an impressive symbol of his wealth and accomplishments. As Celeste walked inside, her eyes glided over the expensive decor, glittering chandeliers and modern furniture, but she didn't linger on anything for too long. She walked over to the large window, which offered a breathtaking view of the city at night, and said, "6 months, Adam. Not one more day." Her voice was resolute, with a steel in it that he liked and feared at the same time. Adam thought with a smile that this was just the beginning. Confident in his charm, he decided he could change her mind with money, luxury, and the opportunities he had to offer. Within days, he was trying to impress her with expensive jewelry, designer dresses, and invitations to exclusive events where she could see all his influence and power. But to his surprise, Celeste just refused all these gifts with a light sigh and a phrase, "This is not what I need." This indifference began to irritate him. He, who had always gotten what he wanted, now found himself in the role of the beggar, and this new role was becoming increasingly difficult. Adam started to behave more aggressively, controlling her schedule, demanding that she stop working because, in his opinion, you don't have to worry about your salary anymore. But she didn't give in, remained calm and firm, which made him even more eager to win her attention. However, in response to his manipulations, she only ridiculed his attempts. "Adam, do you think the world revolves around you? Money, power, none of that matters when it comes to freedom. Haven't you realized yet that this is the only thing I care about?" As the weeks passed, Adam realized more and more that Celeste was playing by completely different rules than he was used to. She rejected all his attempts to influence her, she refused to wear jewelry, paid little attention to luxurious gifts, and even chose places far from the glitter of the world. She resented the idea that someone could buy her attention or love with status or money. In the evenings, when they were alone in the large, impressive, but cold penthouse, Adam began to feel that this marriage was not just a formality. And although he still considered himself the player in control, deep down he was beginning to feel irritated. He didn't even notice how his inner desire to win was turning into something more. Celeste, who remained a mystery to him, was increasingly arousing his curiosity and even respect. October 28, 2024, 1642. One evening he found her on the terrace. Celeste, wrapped in a warm scarf, stood by the railing, watching the flickering lights of the city. Her silhouette seemed so peaceful and detached that he could not help but come closer. "Celeste," he began, trying to find words that could melt the ice between them. But she didn't answer, just gave him a quick, cold glance, as if she already knew what he was going to say. "I don't understand you," Adam admitted. "Another woman in your position would be thrilled with all this, with my attempts to make our life together better." Celeste exhaled and smiled ironically. Her eyes shone with a relaxed calmness. "Adam, what you're doing has nothing to do with trying to make our life better. You want me to submit to you. And I don't want that. And you haven't yet realized the most important thing: all these things, all your gifts, they are empty, they have no soul." He was struck by her words, simple yet stunning. Adam, who had always been able to manipulate people, now felt powerless in front of her. Celeste seemed to read his thoughts, penetrating the depths where he tried to hide his own weaknesses. Her words emphasized exactly what he didn't want to admit: his life, overflowing with wealth, was actually empty. Later, he tried to act more harshly. He controlled her schedule, depriving her of the opportunity to do what she was interested in. When she said she wanted to continue working, he brushed it off, trying to force her to stay at home because, in his opinion, a businessman's wife should play the role of not just a wife, but a partner who shares his interests. But Celeste remained steadfast. Every time he expected her to submit, she responded with a dignity that threw him off balance. Her restraint and refusal to bend to his will was more than just stubbornness, it was her inner strength. Adam could see this strength pulling her away from him, and it made him feel like he was losing control of the game. Finally, in a moment of desperation, when he couldn't figure out how else to influence her, Adam decided to take an emotional step. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, he sat down across from her and tried to be sincere. "What do you want from me?" he asked, sounding irritated but also curious. "Why do you continue to be here, knowing that you will get nothing from me but this contract?" Celeste looked at him with a frankness that surprised him. "I'm not here to get anything from you. I'm here to show you that there are more important things in life than money and control. And if you can't understand that, then none of your attempts to impress me are worth anything." Adam, though surprised, tried to turn the conversation in his direction. "But you knew you were signing up for this, Celeste. What do you get out of being part of this ridiculous bet?" She thought for a moment and then answered, looking him straight in the eye, "Adam, we all have our motives. Sometimes it takes patience, not a sword, to break someone." Her words seemed almost like a riddle to him, and for the first time he felt like he was being investigated and studied, not the one playing the game. From that moment on, Adam began to notice how his own life began to become a battlefield. Every conversation, every glance between them turned into a kind of competition. And although he wanted to win, part of him had already begun to admire her strength and independence. His life, which had previously been full of crazy parties, business deals, and glitter, suddenly lost its meaning. The more he tried to impose his rules, the stronger Celeste became. Her indifference to all his attempts, her confidence and calmness made her look like a fortress that could not be stormed. And this was her victory. She did not try to change him, she forced him to rethink his own principles. Adam began to spend more time alone, with thoughts that had never bothered him before. He repeatedly found himself wondering what was really valuable in his life. October 28, 2024, 16:42. As the months went by, Adam began to lose his peace. His life, which had previously been full of clarity, goals, and undeniable victories, suddenly ceased to be so defined. Celeste became not just a challenge for him, but almost an obsession. He couldn't understand how a woman who seemed to be so contrary to all his usual rules could take such a place in his mind. Her calmness and independence slowly destroyed his confidence, forcing him to return to the question again and again, who is really running this game? Every night, returning to the cold and majestic penthouse, Adam found himself thinking that the space suddenly seemed empty. The furniture, the paintings, the giant panoramic windows that overlooked the lights of the city at night, all of it was just a shell, shiny but soulless. And although every object in his home was worth more than some people earn in a lifetime, he eventually realized that it was behind these objects that he was hiding from himself. One evening, unable to bear his own thoughts, he decided to do something he hadn't done in years. He left his penthouse and set out to wander the city on foot, as if looking for a way out of his own head. London came alive with nightlife, people in cafes, street musicians, couples walking under the light of the lanterns. It was a world that he hadn't noticed for a long time, and now he suddenly felt like an outsider, distant from this living pulse of the city. When he returned home, he found Celeste on the terrace again. She was standing in the shade, quietly gazing at the lights of the big city. She seemed to almost merge with the night, mysterious, elusive, cold and warm at the same time. She was silent, not paying attention to his presence, but there was some inexplicable power in this silence that fascinated him more and more. "You know, I've been with a lot of women," Adam suddenly broke the silence, not knowing why he had said it at all. "But none of them have ever made me feel like this, like I'm losing myself." Celeste turned to him, her eyes almost laughing lightly, making him feel like a schoolboy in front of a teacher. "Adam, you've spent your whole life building a protective wall between yourself and the world, hiding everything real behind money, success, and those walls. But you've never asked yourself what's really important to you. You have everything except one thing: honesty with yourself." It almost made him angry, even though Celeste's words were true. He was used to being admired, respected, even feared, but no one had ever said such things to his face. Her words pierced his pride, but inside he already knew she was right. Celeste was the only person who saw him without fear, without masks and protective gloss. He tried to regain control again by arranging an unusual trip for her, believing that the warm sea and an expensive resort that few people could afford would melt her ice. However, even there Celeste behaved just as restrained. She enjoyed the sunsets, swam in the sea, relaxed, but still maintained her independence. He couldn't understand how it was possible for her to enjoy life but remain indifferent to his attempts to win her over. One evening, on the beach, when they were sitting next to each other, looking at the night sky, Adam could not stand it. "Why are you always so calm, as if nothing can hurt you? Don't you have any desire to change anything, to obey me?" Celeste smiled. "And do you think, Adam, that happiness is in submission? Or can you tell yourself what you're really looking for?" His eyes narrowed at her bluntness, and he was furious that he no longer felt like the master of his game. For the first time in his life, Adam felt that he could not buy his way into her soul. And although anger grew in him, all that remained was to marvel even more at her strength. She perceived life in a different way than he had ever been able to, enjoying the simple things while unraveling its mysteries. October 28, 2024, 1642. The following weeks were almost a nightmare for him. Celeste seemed to him like a fortress that could not be taken. She left for work every morning, returning in the evening as if their luxurious abode were nothing more than a stopover. She hardly noticed his gifts, secretly left flowers, or even his attempts to talk about serious things. Her independence, her indifference to his wealth, only made him more eager to win her heart. Finally, in a moment of weakness, he decided to do something he had never done before. He tried to open up. "Celeste, you are changing me. I never thought anyone could show me my own weakness like you do. I don't even know what I want from you, but, maybe for the first time in my life I just need to be with someone real." Celeste looked at him for a long time, and in her eyes she could see a casual wisdom that deeply affected him. "Adam, each of us lives by our own rules. But if you want real intimacy, you have to learn to be vulnerable. Not to control, not to lead, but just to feel. And only then, perhaps, you will be able to understand why I don't submit to your games." His heart seemed to shrink at these words. He felt as if he were defenseless in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. This woman, who seemed like a mystery to him, made him look deeper into himself. Adam increasingly felt lost in his own emotions. He was used to being a person who always had an answer to everything, who was in control of both the situation and the people around him. But with Celeste, everything was different. She remained unattainable, like a fog that dissipates at dawn, leaving only a sense of a lost chance. Over time, Adam began to realize that it wasn't just about the couple anymore. Celeste had touched something inside him, something he had carefully hidden even from himself, the insecurity and fear that his wealth and status meant nothing in reality. Her coldness toward his money and self-confidence became an increasingly elusive form of temptation. Every time she refused a gift or let his attempts to control her life go unanswered, he felt both scorned and fascinated. Her strength, which lay in her simplicity and independence, frightened him, made him realize how empty his life had been up to that point. One evening, unable to bear his inner tension, Adam decided to talk to an old friend whom he trusted with his innermost thoughts. He invited him to a small, cozy bar in the city center, a place where they had spent time after long business days discussing life and business triumphs. But this time it was different. "Thomas, do you ever feel like you're losing control of your life?" Adam suddenly asked, twirling his whiskey glass in his hands. His eyes were focused on a distant point, as if he was looking somewhere far beyond this room. Thomas looked at him in surprise, not used to seeing his confident friend so lost. "You're usually the one telling me how to run my life and business, not the other way around," he smiled, hoping to ease the tension. But when he saw that Adam wasn't in on the joke, Thomas gave up smiling. "It's all because of her, isn't it?" he asked, hinting at Celeste. "You've changed since she came into your life." Adam sighed heavily, finally admitting something that had seemed impossible before. "She makes me feel weak, Thomas. I feel like I'm falling into a void. She's not interested in any of the things that make me Adam Myers rich, confident, powerful. She looks at me as if she sees me as something more than I am." Thomas listened in silence, and his eyes flashed with understanding. "Maybe that's what you've been missing? Maybe she saw the real you, not the one you built for the world? And maybe that's what scares you?" Adam did not immediately come up with an answer. He felt that his friend had gotten to the heart of the problem, but he wasn't ready to admit it. Soon after this conversation, he returned home again, where a relaxed and calm Celeste was waiting for him, who did not even seem to notice his absence. October 28, 2024, 16:42. The following days passed in silent tension. Adam caught her every glance, felt every hint of emotion passing over her face. Their evenings together increasingly resembled a game of silence, where they, like two strangers, cautiously watched each other. But one evening, sitting next to each other on a large leather sofa in his luxurious living room, they had a conversation that changed everything. "Adam, have you ever been truly happy?" Celeste suddenly asked, her voice soft but firm. She was sitting back, holding a glass of red wine, but her gaze was focused and even serious. He froze, as if not ready for such a direct, almost personal conversation. His instinct was to dodge, to joke, to avoid, but something inside him made him answer honestly. "I'm not sure. I had everything I wanted, but maybe it was just filling an emptiness that had always been there. I thought that I would be happy when I became successful, when I got more money, when others recognized me. But now I'm not sure that's enough." Her eyes sparkled, and for the first time she seemed to see him not as a businessman, but as a man with his own insecurities and weaknesses. "You know, happiness is not always about achievement. Sometimes happiness is just being in harmony with yourself, not feeling the need to prove something to others, and sometimes it's being real, unprotected, ready to accept yourself as you are." Her words settled in him like a hard truth that he had been avoiding all his life. He felt a glimmer of something new inside him, like some breakthrough understanding that began to penetrate his soul. It was a strange but pleasant feeling, as if he had finally touched the real him, the parts of his personality that had always remained in the shadows. That evening, Adam felt for the first time that maybe he was ready to give up his old habits and outlook on life. And not because he wanted to win this game with Celeste, but because he had a real desire to change himself. The silence of the penthouse at night gave Adam a strange feeling. He sat in his spacious but strangely cold living room, gazing at the twinkling lights of London through the panoramic window. Around him was a luxurious interior, expensive furniture, artwork, everything that symbolized success and power. But these things had lost their meaning and no longer brought him pleasure. For the first time in his life, he felt that the luxury he was so proud of had become nothing more than a burden that emphasized his inner emptiness. Celeste was also at home, but, as usual, she acted as if she were deliberately keeping her distance. She was sitting in her office, looking through some papers, and Adam didn't even know what she was doing. Her mystery was fascinating, and her steadfastness made him think more and more about questions that had never occurred to him before. Why did I ever agree to this bet? He asked himself over and over again, recalling the night at the club when his friend Thomas challenged him. At the time, everything seemed like a simple game, another opportunity to prove his superiority, test his strength and win in yet another unusual situation. But now he began to realize that this bet had long since lost its meaning for him. He seemed to have lost control and perhaps even become confused about his own feelings. One evening, sitting on the terrace, he decided to talk to Celeste. He slowly walked to her office, knocked on the door, and, after receiving discreet permission, entered. She was sitting at her desk, surrounded by papers that looked somehow unexpectedly ordinary for the woman he had thought of as independent and mysterious. "Aren't you bored here?" he suddenly asked, his voice sounding almost soft, and he wasn't sure why he asked the question. Perhaps he expected some kind of answer that could explain her indifference. Celeste looked up, her eyes cool but not hostile. "Don't you think that's a question you should ask yourself?" she replied with a slight hint of a smile. October 28, 2024, 16:42. He was a little annoyed at how easily she always deflected his questions and returned them to him, but there was something genuine about it, something that made him search again and again for answers to deep questions he hadn't touched before. Are you saying that it's my fault that I feel lonely in my own home?" he blurted out, almost indignantly, as if she had struck him in his most vulnerable spot. Celeste looked at him sympathetically and seemed to decide for the first time to give him a frank answer. "Adam, loneliness doesn't just happen. It's not something that comes from circumstances or people around you. Loneliness lives inside us, and unless we are ready to recognize it, no one else can help us." Her words penetrated deep into his soul. He stood there silently looking at her for a long time, and then simply turned and left the room. Something in her words touched him so deeply that he could hardly restrain himself from showing weakness. He, a successful and powerful man, felt so small that he could hardly breathe. A few days later, Adam met Thomas again. They were sitting in a cozy restaurant, and Adam, who was almost never prone to self-reflection, decided to share what was on his mind. He didn't even expect his friend to understand, but he couldn't keep quiet any longer. "Thomas, I didn't think this bet would lead to me asking myself questions at all. Remember how we always said that success is important in life? And now I feel like everything I've achieved has no meaning. It's just a shell with nothing real behind it." Thomas, who had always been his friend in all his crazy ideas, was suddenly silent, and then said quietly, "Or maybe you're just afraid that she saw in you what you were afraid to see? Maybe it's not a question of what she does with your life, but what she reveals in you." Adam thought about it. Celeste was indeed the only one who wasn't afraid to challenge him, and she seemed to see him as he was afraid to be. This scared him, but at the same time attracted him like a magnet. He felt that maybe it was worth doing something he had never done before, compromise. That evening he returned home to find Celeste in her favorite room, a small study with a large bookshelf where she spent her evenings reading. She was sitting deep in a book and didn't even notice him come in. "Celeste," he began, almost hesitantly, "do you ever want to see me differently? Do you see me as someone other than who I am now?" She looked at him, surprised by his directness. Putting the book on the table next to her, she answered thoughtfully, "I see potential in you, Adam. The potential to be more than just a rich man who buys people and things. But can you change? That's up to you." Her answer was both direct and challenging at the same time. Adam felt that this was his chance to change something in his life, a chance for a new path, and he didn't want to miss it. From then on, he began to change. At first, it was small things. He no longer tried to control her schedule, stopped imposing expensive gifts, and instead started spending time with her, just watching and listening. He realized that sometimes people don't need material gifts, but rather simple human warmth and support. Over time, he began to ask her about her work, her interests, and her dreams, which he had previously considered inappropriate for a woman in his world. Celeste didn't always answer right away, but over time she began to open up to him, and a quiet trust was born between them that grew day by day. It was a strange intimacy that he had never felt with anyone before. And although Adam knew that their 6 months together would soon be over, he began to treasure every moment he had with her. He knew that this time he didn't want to lose this woman. For the first time in his life, he felt that his heart truly belonged to someone, and not to the empty rules of the game he had made up for himself. October 28, 2024, 1642. The 6th month of their arrangement was approaching, and the deadline was hanging over Adam like a formidable threat. The more time he spent with Celeste, the more he felt that he couldn't let her just walk away. She was no longer a wagered prize or some kind of test he had to overcome. Celeste had become his guide, his challenge, and his inspiration. She taught him how to feel something, real feelings that until now had seemed inaccessible or even superfluous to him. One night, sitting at dinner, Adam looked at Celeste intently, as if he were seeing her for the first time. She was free, independent, and yet her confidence and genuine calmness attracted him more than any glamorous woman he had ever met before. It was more than a physical attraction. He was drawn to her spirit, to the strength that made her so real. "Celeste, when we finish this term, will you really leave?" he asked, unable to contain his thoughts. His voice sounded a little nervous, which was unusual for him. Celeste, who had been sitting relaxed with a glass of red wine in her hands, looked up at him, and a glimmer of understanding flashed in her eyes. She knew what he was getting at, but her answer was as cold and confident as ever. "Yes, Adam, it was only a contract, and I see no reason to stay longer. You do realize that I'm not here for the money or your power, right?" she replied calmly, as if to remind him of the basics of their agreement. Her words hit him like a cold wind. He felt as if he was about to lose something extremely important, and perhaps for the first time realized how much her presence had changed him. He no longer wanted luxury or influence. All he wanted was to uncover her secrets, to know her completely, and perhaps to convince her that he could be something more for her. That night Adam could not sleep for a long time. He lay in his luxurious bed, staring at the ceiling, and felt his own life becoming cramped. It seemed that Celeste had destroyed all his ideas of what success should look like. He could no longer return to his old life, where everything revolved around status and superficial relationships. He felt a need to find depth, a need for a real connection that he hadn't even realized he had before. The next morning began with a call from Thomas. Their conversation was short, but Thomas reminded him once again about the delivery. Adam felt a sudden resentment. He didn't want anyone to remind him of that bet anymore. "It's just a shell with nothing real behind it." Thomas, who had always been his friend in all his crazy ideas, was suddenly silent, and then said quietly, "Or maybe you're just afraid that she saw in you what you were afraid to see? Maybe it's not a question of what she does with your life, but what she reveals in you." Adam thought about it. Celeste was indeed the only one who wasn't afraid to challenge him, and she seemed to see him as he was afraid to be. This scared him, but at the same time attracted him like a magnet. He felt that maybe it was worth doing something he had never done before, compromise. That evening he returned home to find Celeste in her favorite room, a small study with a large bookshelf where she spent her evenings reading. She was sitting deep in a book and didn't even notice him come in. "Celeste," he began, almost hesitantly, "do you ever want to see me differently? Do you see me as someone other than who I am now?" She looked at him, surprised by his directness. Putting the book on the table next to her, she answered thoughtfully, "I see potential in you, Adam. The potential to be more than just a rich man who buys people and things. But can you change? That's up to you." Her answer was both direct and challenging at the same time. October 28, 2024, 1642. Adam felt that this was his chance to change something in his life, a chance for a new path, and he didn't want to miss it. From then on, he began to change. At first, it was small things. He no longer tried to control her schedule, stopped imposing expensive gifts, and instead started spending time with her, just watching and listening. He realized that sometimes people don't need material gifts, but rather simple human warmth and support. Over time, he began to ask her about her work, her interests, and her dreams, which he had previously considered inappropriate for a woman in his world. Celeste didn't always answer right away, but over time she began to open up to him, and a quiet trust was born between them that grew day by day. It was a strange intimacy that he had never felt with anyone before. And although Adam knew that their 6 months together would soon be over, he began to treasure every moment he had with her. He knew that this time he didn't want to lose this woman. For the first time in his life, he felt that his heart truly belonged to someone, and not to the empty rules of the game he had made up for himself. The 6th month of their arrangement was approaching, and the deadline was hanging over Adam like a formidable threat. The more time he spent with Celeste, the more he felt that he couldn't let her just walk away. She was no longer a wagered prize or some kind of test he had to overcome. Celeste had become his guide, his challenge, and his inspiration. She taught him how to feel something real, feelings that until now had seemed inaccessible or even superfluous to him. One night, sitting at dinner, Adam looked at Celeste intently, as if he were seeing her for the first time. She was free, independent, and yet her confidence and genuine calmness attracted him more than any glamorous woman he had ever met before. It was more than a physical attraction. He was drawn to her spirit, to the strength that made her so real. Days and weeks passed, and Adam still couldn't find peace. After Celeste's departure, his luxurious penthouse began to feel like a cold, almost lifeless place. He no longer found solace there. Expensive furniture, paintings, and a magnificent view of the city, all of these now seemed like mere decorative details that could not fill the emptiness that had settled in his soul. Every time he entered the room where Celeste spent most of her time, his gaze lingered on the traces of her presence, a book left on the table, her favorite cup in the kitchen. He felt that he had lost not just a woman, but a part of himself. She was the spark that made him look at himself from a different angle. And now he felt that without her, his life no longer made sense. This restlessness made him think about what he really wanted to achieve. After so many years of a successful career, victories, and status, he finally decided to make a change he had never thought of. One day, sitting alone in his office, he decided to take action. He began to develop a plan for charitable projects aimed at supporting small entrepreneurs and people whose lives have been affected by tough corporate decisions. The first step was to reach out to a few old acquaintances who had once been his competitors but were now on the verge of bankruptcy due to economic difficulties. He offered them help, financial investments, support in business recovery, and new opportunities for development. To the surprise of many, Adam was genuinely interested in the fate of these people, and it did not go unnoticed. He also started a foundation to support young entrepreneurs who were unable to realize their ideas due to a lack of resources. Adam felt that he was helping others, and it brought him relief and a sense of significance that only his financial successes had previously provided. But now it was something more. It was the first step toward a real connection with the world around him. October 28, 2024, 1642. Adam began attending meetings where he talked to people who had seen him as an enemy in the past. He listened to their stories, realized the pain he had once caused, and gradually began to change his attitude toward life. He wanted real relationships, not superficial acquaintances who were with him only because of his status. Sometimes he wondered what had changed him. After all, this was the first time he really felt like he wanted to be the best version of himself, not for anyone else, but for himself. Celeste pushed him to a place where he was no longer ready to go down the old path. He realized that she had left a mark in his heart and, even without being there, had changed him beyond recognition. The changes in Adam became noticeable to his friends. One day, he met up with Thomas again, who immediately noticed that his old friend was no longer the confident and arrogant businessman he used to be. What happened to you, Adam? You were always the one who won at all costs, and now I see a man who seems to have lost the will to fight," Thomas said with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Adam smiled, but there was no longer the pride in his eyes that had once characterized his personality. He answered quietly, as if confessing to himself, "You know, Thomas, I thought I had won when we made that bet. But in the end, I was the one who lost. I didn't lose money, I lost something much bigger, a man who showed me the true meaning of life." Thomas just shook his head, not fully understanding what his friend was talking about, but seeing the seriousness in his eyes, he didn't ask any more questions. From that moment on, Adam was fully focused on his new goals, but he felt that he was missing something. He couldn't stop thinking about Celeste. Her words, her confidence, her aloofness, all of this became a guiding light for him that he could not ignore. One evening, tired from a busy day, Adam sat on his balcony and looked out at the lights of the city at night. The night lights were reflected in his eyes, but at that moment he was immersed in his thoughts. He decided that he couldn't wait any longer. He had to find Celeste again, talk to her, explain that he was different now. He was no longer the Adam who threw himself into games for profit. He had become a man who was ready to open up and share his true feelings. The next morning he started looking for her. He remembered some of the details Celeste had mentioned in her stories about her past, her hometown, her favorite cafe where she liked to spend time. He went in search of her, feeling that he needed even the smallest fragments of her life to get closer to her. When he found the city where she used to live, the first thing he did was go to the very small cafe she had once mentioned in a conversation. He did not know if he would meet her there, but this place, at least partially, allowed him to feel her presence. He would sit at a table where she might have sat once, drinking the coffee she liked, and staring out at the streets she knew. October 28, 2024, 16:45. One day, when he had almost given up hope, she appeared. Adam saw her at the other end of the street, and his heart beat faster. Celeste walked slowly, holding a book, and seemed calm, as if she had never known pain or anxiety. Her figure, her movements, her confidence filled his mind again. He quickly left the cafe and went to meet her. His heart was beating so fast that he could barely hear himself greet her. Her face expressed surprise, but also calmness, as if she had anticipated this meeting. "Adam, what are you doing here?" she asked calmly, although there was a slight tinge of interest in her voice. He held his breath, trying to collect his thoughts, and finally answered, "I came because I can't live without you anymore. I realize that the real victory is not winning the game, but the love I feel for you." Her eyes sparkled for a moment, but she remained reserved. "Adam, are you sure you know what you want? Or are you just afraid of being alone?" He took a deep breath, trying to convey all his feelings in one look. "Celeste, I've changed because of you. I'm not the same person I used to be. I'm not looking for gain or illusory control. I just want to be with you because you gave me a chance to see life differently. I don't want to play anymore, I want to be real." She was silent, but her eyes no longer held the coldness he had once felt. She saw a different person in front of her, a person who was ready to fight for what he believed in. "Okay, Adam, maybe we can try again. But know that it will be a difficult path, and you must be prepared for difficulties you have never known before," she said, finally smiling in a way he had dreamed of seeing. This moment was the real beginning of a new life for Adam. The beginning of a new chapter for Adam, and Celeste was something he had been looking forward to, but also dreading. He understood that it was a chance to correct his mistakes, to regain the trust of the person he had suddenly fallen in love with. Their path was not easy. He had to relearn how to build relationships without the usual control, without pressure, only with openness and authenticity. After a long conversation, they agreed to meet regularly, but Celeste remained steadfast in her independence. She did not quit her job, did not accept expensive gifts, and did not allow their relationship to depend on Adam's financial capabilities. This was a challenge for him, but at the same time he felt that this path to a real relationship was giving him special pleasure. Every meeting with her was filled with new experiences. They chose a variety of places for their dates, from small cafes off the beaten path to park lawns where they could admire nature and just talk about everything. Celeste was opening up a new world for him, one that had no place for prestige or social status. One evening, they decided to visit an art gallery where an exhibition of local artists was taking place. Adam, who was accustomed to masterpieces of classical art and famous paintings, was somewhat surprised by the simplicity and naivety of some of the works, but quickly realized that it was in this simplicity that the real beauty lay. He saw Celeste looking at each painting with admiration, delving into the colors and symbolism, finding meaning in every line. "This painting reminds me how sometimes you should forget about everything around you and just let yourself be yourself," she said, stopping in front of the young artist's work, where bright colors flowed smoothly into each other, creating the illusion of movement. Adam thought about her words. It was so unusual for him to perceive art without reference to its value or prestige. He realized that the real value was not the price but the emotions it evoked, and Celeste had taught him that. October 28, 2024, 16:45. They continued their walk through the gallery and then went to a cozy restaurant on the outskirts of town. The restaurant was not too expensive, but it was extremely atmospheric: dim lanterns, elegant wooden tables, and a small fireplace, where they settled down for the evening. Adam, who usually chose restaurants with the most expensive menus, felt for the first time that the atmosphere and company were much more important than the price. While they were waiting for their order, he said quietly, "Celeste, you have no idea how much you have changed me. I couldn't imagine myself in a place like this before. I thought my success was measured only by status and influence. But now, with you, I feel much happier and more authentic than ever." Celeste just smiled and replied, "Adam, true happiness is being in harmony with yourself and those around you. You have always been strong, but now you are learning to be real, and that is the greatest achievement you can have." Her words touched him so deeply that he realized that he did not want to lose this woman anymore. She became his inspiration, his reason to become better. He could no longer imagine his life without her and was ready to do everything possible to keep her by his side. Over time, their relationship grew even deeper. They traveled together to small towns, where they walked along narrow streets, looked in antique shops, and explored ancient castles and historical sites. These trips brought them even closer. Together they discovered new parts of the world, exchanged memories, and each such moment became special for them. On one of their trips, they stopped in a small village by the sea, where they rented a cozy cottage overlooking the ocean. Every evening they sat on the beach, listening to the sound of the waves, and talked about their dreams, plans, and hopes. Celeste talked about her childhood dreams, how she once wanted to become an artist, and then decided to devote herself to exploring nature. Adam, in turn, shared his memories of how long he had been striving for success and how often he had forgotten about his own happiness for the sake of prestige. "Celeste, I'm so grateful for these moments," he said one evening as they sat on the beach wrapped in blankets. "I feel like I'm starting a new life, a life where I'm no longer dependent on money or status. It was you who showed me that true happiness is found in simple things and in people who are willing to be there for me not for profit, but simply because it's real." She listened attentively, and it seems that for the first time her eyes were soft and warm. "Adam, you have changed, and it shows. You have become closer to yourself, and I am sincerely glad to have been a part of this journey." Their conversation lasted late into the night, and when they finally returned to their cottage, Adam felt that a bond had been formed between them that was stronger than any promise or commitment. It was the closeness he had always longed for, but could not find in his old life. After returning from this trip, Adam continued to do charity work, but now it became not just a way to correct past mistakes, but a true calling. He began supporting projects related to environmental protection, supporting young artists, even helping women entrepreneurs who wanted to realize their ideas but lacked resources. Celeste saw Adam change, and it strengthened her confidence in him. She realized that he had become different, that he was now ready to love sincerely, without selfish motives. He was a completely different person than the one she had met at the very beginning of their story. One evening, after another charity event that Adam organized to support young artists, they sat in the cozy coffee shop where they had first met after their agreement was made. It was almost symbolic to return to the same place, but as completely different people. "Do you remember, Celeste, how we met here?" he smiled, feeling the past and present merge in one place. October 28, 2024, 16:45. She nodded, her eyes sparkling. "Yes, I remember. Back then, you were a person I barely knew, and with whom I didn't even want to deal. But now I see a completely different person." Adam felt that this was his chance to say what he had been meaning to say for a long time. He took her hand, looking her straight in the eye, and said, "Celeste, I want you to know that you have become the most important person in my life. You didn't just change me, you showed me what true happiness is. And I can't imagine my life without you." She smiled, a little embarrassed but happy at the same time. For the first time since they had met, she allowed herself to open up. "Adam, I feel the same way. You've shown me that you can change, and now I'm ready to share my life with you." Their hands joined and they exchanged glances full of love and understanding. It was a real promise, a promise of two people who had gone through difficult trials and become stronger to start a new chapter of their lives together. Several months passed, and the relationship between Adam and Celeste gradually took on a form they had never dreamed of. Life became much brighter, filled with moments of happiness and small discoveries that they shared with each other. Every day was an opportunity for them to learn not only about each other, but also about themselves. Adam, who once cared only about his reputation and financial success, felt that he had found a new meaning in life. He no longer sought to be the center of attention, no longer needed society to confirm his worth. All his efforts were now focused on maintaining and strengthening his relationship with Celeste, showing her that he was capable of true love. One day, when they were walking together in the park, Adam suddenly proposed an idea for a joint project. He looked at Celeste closely as he told her about his idea to create a foundation to support young artists who are looking for their place in the world. "I want us to develop this business together, and I want you to be a part of this initiative. You've always inspired me to be better, and I think your energy and intuition will be perfect for making this project come to life." Celeste was surprised by his offer at first. It was a real show of trust, and she realized how serious his intention was. But at the same time, it was an opportunity to share her knowledge and benefit people who were just starting out. "That sounds great, Adam," she replied, smiling, "but you know I won't be part of this project just as your partner. I want us to work on equal terms so that we can each realize our ideas and visions." Adam nodded in agreement. He understood that it was very important for her to have her own freedom and independence, even in joint projects. Their connection was so deep and trusting that he accepted it without question. They became a team, working together to create a platform for young talent where everyone could find support, resources, and motivation. The launch of the foundation was unexpectedly successful. Their project quickly attracted the attention of not only artists, but also the media, businessmen, and philanthropists. The opening was attended by well-known artists, photographers, and sculptors, as well as young talents looking for their own path. Celeste, with her natural gift of communication and deep understanding of art, became the soul of this initiative. She inspired everyone involved to find their own unique style, their own voice, and her words sounded like support that did not allow them to give up. Adam noticed how she glowed with joy when she worked with young people, seeing in each of them a potential that was just waiting to be developed. For him, this was evidence that their work was meaningful and his changes were not in vain. He also took an active part in the foundation's events, supported young artists financially, helped organize exhibitions, and even took lessons from Celeste to better understand the art world. This brought them even closer to each other, giving them a common goal and inspiration. October 28, 2024, 1645. One day, they decided to go together to an art festival in a small European town where their foundation was presenting the work of several young artists. It was a trip full of romance and adventure, as they both loved exploring new places and finding inspiration. The festival was held in the open air, against the backdrop of ancient architecture and picturesque landscapes. Every day was full of new experiences. They met artists, attended workshops, tasted local food at markets, and walked through narrow streets holding hands. For them, it was a period when they could enjoy the simple joys of life, be alone among a crowd of people, but feel quite happy. In one of the cozy cafes, Adam shared his thoughts that had been bothering him for a long time. "Celeste, I don't know if I will ever be able to thank you for everything you have done for me. You opened my eyes to a world I had never seen before. You have given me the true meaning of life." She listened to him attentively, her eyes radiating warmth and tenderness. "Adam, you don't need to thank me. You changed your life, you made your choice. I was just there for you. And I am extremely pleased to see you become what you could always be, but you just didn't know how to do it." Their conversation continued, and every word, every look was filled with love and mutual respect. They felt as if the whole world belonged to them and that no obstacle could ever destroy what they had built together. When they returned home, they began to discuss new ideas for the foundation, planning to expand its activities and involve more people. Their partnership grew into a true collaboration, where they supported each other, exchanged ideas, and always listened to each other's opinions. Celeste remained an inspiration to Adam, and every day he tried to be the support she was always looking for. But one day, while preparing for another event, Celeste suddenly fell ill. At first, it seemed to be just fatigue from a busy schedule, but over time, her condition worsened. Adam felt really anxious, because for the first time in his life he was afraid of losing the one he loved most. He did everything he could to provide her with the best medical care, but Celeste insisted that it was only temporary and that she just needed to rest. However, he could not calm down. Every day, he was there for her, helping her with the little things, making sure she rested and didn't overwork. One evening, when they were sitting at home, Adam suggested that they postpone all the foundation's events to another date so that she could fully recover. "You are much more important to me than any business or project. I don't want you to think about work. Just rest and know that I'm here for you." Celeste looked at him, touched by his support, and said quietly, "Adam, you are incredible. I always knew you were strong, but now I see that you are capable of real care. Thank you for that." Their evening continued in peace, and for the first time in a long time, they simply enjoyed each other's presence without thinking about work or projects. Celeste was gradually recovering, and looking at Adam, she felt that she had found someone she could trust. She realized that their relationship had gone through many trials, but had only grown stronger. Months passed and their foundation continued to grow. Together they became a real team, not only helping others but also supporting each other. Adam, who had once been confident in his independence, now found true support in a person who brought out the best in him. And every time they worked on a new project, he felt that life was finally filled with real meaning. This was their story together, their path to love and understanding, which began as a simple transaction but turned into something more, a bond they cherished day by day. October 28, 2024, 1645. A few years after the foundation of their foundation and numerous joint projects, Adam and Celeste's lives were filled with peace and harmony that they had never even dreamed of at the beginning. Now they were not only partners in business, but also partners in everything that brought them happiness. They shared not only their work, but also the joys and worries that made every day unique and unrepeatable. One evening, sitting together in their favorite cafe where they had once met, Adam took her hand and said quietly, "Celeste, you have become a real miracle to me over the years. I can't imagine what my life would have looked like if I hadn't accepted that crazy proposal on that first day. You made me happy, you made me real, and now I want you to always be by my side, no matter what our future challenges are." Celeste smiled, her eyes full of gratitude and warmth. "Adam, it's been a long road, but I'm glad we've traveled it together. You have become someone I can rely on, and I am no longer afraid of the future. I have you now." That evening, Adam decided to propose to Celeste. He knew they had both been through a difficult time, but he felt he was ready to take the plunge. Choosing a quiet corner of the park where they often walked, he stopped and, taking her hand, got down on one knee. "Celeste, I can't imagine my life without you anymore. You have become everything I could have ever dreamed of. Will you marry me?" Her face shone with happiness, and tears of joy flowed from her eyes. "Yes, Adam. Yes, would love to." Their wedding was small but surprisingly cozy. Only the closest friends and family, soft music, a garden decorated with flowers and sincere smiles of all those present. This day became a real celebration of their love, which was the result of a difficult journey, but every moment of this journey was worth every minute, because it led them to the happiness they were building together. After the ceremony, holding hands and walking among the guests, they exchanged glances full of promises for the future. It was a new beginning, the beginning of their life together, which they decided to build on trust, support and true love. As the years passed, their home was always filled with warmth, joy and support. Their foundation continued to grow, helping more and more people, and their love was a beautiful memory and an inspiration to those who came to them for advice and support. This story, which began with a ridiculous deal, ended with real happiness for Adam and Celeste, who were able to find themselves and create a real family. The final part, the finale, is the next 50 to 60 characters. And you know, even after everything that happened, even after I let go of the past and found a new meaning with Anna, sometimes I feel anxious. Sometimes, when I look at her, I suddenly think, what if everything happens again? What if my fears and doubts come true again? The past doesn't just disappear. It leaves its traces, its shadows, which from time to time remind us of ourselves, trying to poison our minds and hearts again. But I realize that real relationships, real intimacy, cannot be built on distrust. Anna is a different person, a different story. She showed me that love can be honest, open, that trust is the basis of everything. I am working on myself to avoid making the same mistakes, so that my fears do not destroy what I have found. I know that if I let these anxieties control me, it will only be self-destructive. And now, sitting at this table and writing down all my thoughts, I am ready to share my realization with you. Perhaps each of us has our own fears, especially after a difficult relationship. We all carry this burden, doubts, resentment, pain. But holding on to them means giving up on the future. I made the decision to let go of my past, to stop giving it power over my present, and it gave me freedom. True happiness does not lie in looking back at the past over and over again, but in moving forward with courage, opening your heart to new feelings and new possibilities. October 28, 2024, 16:45. Friends, this is the end of my story. It has been a long, difficult road, full of ups and downs, mistakes and important lessons. I don't know if I did the right thing. I don't know if anything justifies everything that happened. But I made my choice, I went my own way, and now I am trying to live with this truth. That's why I'm asking you to share your opinion in the comments. Did I do the right thing? Could any of you have acted differently in my place? Perhaps you know something that could help me become a better person. I appreciate your feedback, your advice. It is important for me to know what you think and to realize that we are not alone in our search for answers. And, of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories and videos. I do everything I do for you. I try to share my thoughts, my experience, so that maybe I can help someone avoid my mistakes or find an answer in their own experiences. I also apologize for any mistakes. I am not a native speaker, and I create all these videos using artificial intelligence. I am learning how to express my thoughts and share my feelings, and your support is very important to me.